Thanks so much for being here, everybody. My name's Shay Halavity, and I work at the Barton Springs Edwards Aquifer Conservation District. And I just really appreciate all of y'all showing up and showing so much enthusiasm for rainwater harvesting and also water conservation. Just a heads up for the folks who are in the back section, we are only using the center screen. So if you want to be able to read stuff, I recommend moving up to the front, and this is your opportunity to do so. You do you, whatever is best for you. But I really appreciate everybody who's come and helped coordinate this event. So, of course, my team at the Barton Springs Conservation District, also the team at Hayes Trinity GCD, and of course the folks over there at Southwest Travis County GCD have also done a lot of work to help with this. And we also got support from the Hill Country Alliance. So, really grateful for all those folks, and then also all of our amazing rainwater harvesting retailers who will be here after the event if you want to continue the great conversations you were having. So first off, I want to introduce the general managers at each of those groundwater conservation districts. So, best is first. So Barton Springs Edwards Aquifer Conservation District, obviously. I'll introduce Charlie Flatten.
Good afternoon. Thanks for coming out to the show. It's great to see all of you. I see a lot of familiar faces, and what I'm most thankful for is all the new faces, because that means that we're getting the word out. The Barton Springs District is the manager of the Edwards Aquifer and the Trinity Aquifer in eastern Hayes County and South Travis County. Never in my life did I think that I would spend so much time managing groundwater by talking about rainwater. We don't have enough to go around, especially if people keep moving in, and rainwater is a great way to satisfy demand. If you have any questions or need information, any one of the groundwater district's websites are fantastic sources for that kind of information. We're happy for you to call the office. We spend a lot of time talking about water demands and how to satisfy those demands. So please give us a call or go to our websites if you have any questions. And I'll turn it over to Laura Thomas, who is the general manager of the Hayes Trinity Rainwater Conservation District.
Thanks, Trevor. Hayes Trinity Groundwater is in the western portion of Hayes County. It's one of the few groundwater districts that's on the sliver of the county, not the whole county or multiple counties. Charlie said a lot, so I'm just going to say one thing. This is probably a self-selecting, very smart crowd, but we remain, despite the recent rains, in significant, ongoing, historic drought. Probably has become the drought of record for certain categories, and probably will become the drought of record, possibly. We hope not. We hope that changes. But the most recent Palmer map I saw, Hayes County remained in D3 extreme drought. So it's excellent that you all are here, and I hope that you will spread the word. And if anyone knows grant money or subsidies, anything like that that helps offset the cost of rain collection systems, that is usually the biggest impediment to people using them, is truly just the cost. People compare it to the cost of a well, which is a huge amount of money. And if we could, as a community here, all this, we need to pay for the Texas metal tanks and we need them to get their money, but we need help with those ideas. So if anyone has access to people that know these sorts of things and can spread the word, that's great. But thank you for being here, and tell everyone you know about what you've learned. And I will say that Barton Springs District and Southwestern Travis County's district, their websites have much better rainwater pages than ours do. But one day ours will catch up. Thanks, guys.
Hey everybody, I'm Lane Cockrell. I'm the general manager and hydrogeologist at the Southwestern Travis County GCD. That's kind of the mint green odd shape to the west of both of these other, well, north and west of both of these other GCDs. I want to start by thanking Shay for the outstanding job she's done bringing this all together with maybe some help, but she's done an outstanding job. We're a relatively young groundwater conservation district. We've been around for just a handful of years, created by the legislature back in 2019 and adopted our first rules in the fall of 2020. No, we were created in 2017. At any rate, we've been around for a few years, so we're still building our groundwater monitoring network and regulatory programs. If you are a well owner in the southwestern portion of Travis County and have not registered your well with our district, I would encourage you to do so. We're responsible for protecting and managing the Trinity Aquifer in our little slice of heaven, and it's hard for us to protect what we don't know is there. So I would encourage you to go back to our table and talk to Barbara or visit our website. We can get your well registered. And we also have a lot of rainwater resources and well owner resources there as well. So thank you all so much for being here. Appreciate y'all's commitment to conservation and considering these alternative sources, because as Charlie pointed out, there's really not enough groundwater to go around at this point. So thank y'all.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody. I appreciate it. And so next up, we'll have our presentation, which includes a little bit of hydrogeology 101. Sometimes I say that word and people get freaked out. It just means how water moves through the earth or through rock. So just take it down to that simplicity. So we're going to have a really great presentation on that, and then we'll get to the good stuff about rainwater harvesting. Our presentation today is hosted by Rainbees. They are an incredible resource, and you will be sold after hearing Larry talk today. Him and Rainbees as an organization do a lot of free resources for folks and do free consulting for what rainwater sources you may need at your house and like what setup you can get. And so I'll let Larry take it from here. But hope you all enjoy, and we'll have questions at the end, but I think Larry likes questions throughout the end of it too.
Thank you.
But Dr. Larry Sunn, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I think my mic is on okay. Everybody can hear me just fine? All right, good. When we talk about water in Texas is going to be either surface water or underground water. And when we talk about surface waters are managed by different kind of authorities than groundwater. And so when we talk about that first, if we go to the lower area of this jurisdiction, if you will, down through in here, we have GBRA. GBRA is the authority for all of the surface water that's within that jurisdiction that you see mapped out there, and that includes the San Marcos, Guadalupe, and Blanco River. But in addition to that, in the northern area of that, and I'll just pop this one up in here, they have Canyon Lake as part of their jurisdiction, and so the water that's in Canyon Lake is going to be managed by those folks there. Now, if we go north of that, we have another area of jurisdiction, and I have one superimposed over the other, and I'll drop the second one so that you can see the Lower Colorado River Authority, and that river authority is going to handle the Llano River, the Pedernales, and also the Colorado, and I think the Sandy is in there also, and so is one called the Onion. All of those are inside of that jurisdiction, and in addition to that, you have 3 lakes that are part of that system that are controlled by the Lower Colorado, and that's Horseshoe Bay, Lake Travis, and Lake Buchanan, and I think there's a small one in there someplace that I can never remember the name of. Thank you for dimming the lights. Thank you. It makes that show up just a little bit better for you. So other than that, when we talk about water, we also have groundwater, and groundwater is going to be managed by those people who are the groundwater conservation districts, and we have 3 of them that are here today to help you get information about basically what their status is. And I'm going to ask if that, after I finish with my presentation and we get to some questions, if I can get those folks to maybe give us a really quick update on the status of the aquifer. What is the status today? What is the prognosis about where we see it's going to go? And so we'll ask them to do that when that gives them a little time to prepare whatever their thoughts might be. So when we talk about GCDs, the GCDs are going to be throughout the area, but they are kind of led by, in our area, something that is called a PGMA. And a PGMA is a priority groundwater management area. And back in the late 1900s and the early 2000s, the state of Texas started to realize that we had some areas that were particularly bad in terms of what's going to be the water availability. And so they identified these PGMAs that you see in the green areas right over there. And I want to talk specifically about that one over there. So let's zoom in on that just a little bit. And you'll notice that we in Hays County, Travis County, and Comal County are part of that on the western side. The eastern side, this part that's over here, is part of the Edwards Aquifer. And I'm going to talk about both of them briefly today. And so when we talk about these areas are going to be managed by various groundwater conservation districts who you already heard from a little bit. And so if we take that away and we bring up, this is the Hays County GCD. It's on the western side of Hays County. Here we have the southwestern Travis, and that one is up into here, and it does not extend through all of Travis County. It's only the southwestern area. And then, obviously, this side is the Edwards Aquifer. And then that's the northern part of that is the Barton Springs Edwards Aquifer Groundwater District. And then down below that is the Greater Edwards Aquifer Authority, and that's the one that goes all the way down into San Antonio. And then below that, we also have the Comal Trinity Groundwater Conservation District that manages the Trinity Aquifer that's there. Now, why do I bring up Comal County? I served on that board of directors for 8 years, and that's how I got basically enthused about rain harvesting and gathering water. And so that's kind of the background, but I'm going to talk about all of those as we get just a little bit. And I want to talk specifically about the Trinity Aquifer. Sometimes I go to make a lecture someplace and somebody says, well, I'm not in the Trinity, I'm in the Glen Rose. Yeah, sort of. So when we talk about the Trinity actually has 3 strata. The upper strata is the Glen Rose. And so if you have a well that's about 450 feet deep, but you're not on a big old hill, then you're probably going to be someplace in the upper Trinity. The middle Trinity is called the Hensel, and the middle Trinity is down about 700 feet-ish in that area. And then the lower area underneath that is called the Hostin, and the Hostin is known as the lower Trinity. And I'm going to give you 2 examples of that well in just a little bit, or that area. In some areas of the Hostin, there is saline water. And so sometimes people drill into it and expecting to get good water, and they end up with pretty salty water. And so that does happen when we get very, very deep into the aquifer. Hostin is down about 1,000 feet, 800 feet in that area over there. So I was doing some research trying to get here, and I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll go and find a couple of wells that maybe are a little bit indicative of the area. And I just picked 2. And these are the first 2 that I picked. The first one I'm going to talk about here is well number 502. It's a state well, and that state well is located over where St. Stephen's Episcopal School is. And that well is in the Hostin Foundation or formation, and it is 962 feet deep. So that's a pretty deep well, okay? So now, if we look at it, this is what the layout of that well has been since it started to be measured back in 1949. So there's 1949. The drought of record that we have was from 1950 to 1959. So this big drop that you see right over there is primarily from that area, but they were not measuring very often during that time. So the measurement didn't pick up until the early 1970s again. And then after that, what I'd like you to notice is that for the most part, it was pretty level until it got to right about here. And when it got to this point, then it started to decline, and it declined rapidly. And I'm going to come back to that in a second after I talk about the second well. The second well is 120, and these are both state wells, by the way. So if I go to 120, it's located over in the HEB owned property. It is also in the Hostin, and it is 855 feet deep. So now if I bring that up, now you notice that it didn't start until 1984. That's when they first started recording there. And then it was pretty even all the way across until it got to right about there. And from that point, it started to have its decline, if you will. So let's take in, those two wells are both in the southwestern Travis County GCD area. And when we talk about those two wells, if I superimpose one on top of the other, it looks like that. This is the time frame. So these two time frames are going to match up. So this is going to be the red one is going to be from here on, which is starting in 1984. That says 1989 right over there. But notice that both of them were nice and level until we got to that point right there, which was 2008. At 2008, then the magnitude of what happened to the groundwater is what really manifested. Two things happened. One, we had bigger and bigger cities. We had more and more impervious cover. And then in addition to that, we had more and more people who had their straw in the drink. Years ago when I was a kid and we went to the Dairy Queen and there'd be 4 of us and we didn't have very much money and we would all share one shake. We had 4 straws in that sucker and it didn't last very long, and that's what's happening to the aquifer. It is simply coming out faster than it's going in. And sometimes when I do this and I talk about this, people say, well, will it ever recover? Listen to this, folks. From 1949, during that drought of record is when it really suffered. It will never recover. Never. It is not physically possible for that to happen. And I'll explain why as we get into the aquifers in just a little while. But I'm here to tell you, it is not going to get any better. It's going to get worse and worse and worse. And so therefore, we have to do something in order for us to be able to protect the water supply. And we're going to get to some of that in just a little bit. So that brings me then to the aquifers. And so the next piece that I'd like to do is talk about the 2 primary aquifers that are in our area. And so we're going to talk about both the Trinity and the Edwards. And I'm going to start out by talking about the Trinity initially. And I want you to see how huge it is. The Trinity is gigantic. This is the Oklahoma border right over here. And so that Trinity is coming all the way from there down to San Antonio and doglegs out towards Sonora. And it's a huge aquifer. And because it is such a huge aquifer, we kind of have some different thoughts to it than reality. And so let me talk a little bit about that. First, this area that you see right over here that is hash marked is not half a Trinity. It's not half of the aquifer. It is all the aquifer, but the part with the hash lines right here really has a confining layer on top. It is kind of like a hard hat on somebody who's a construction site. It's built of shale and some dense clay, and so it's called a confined area. So that confined area is just as much the aquifer as the dark green stuff. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing that I want you to notice is that the Trinity is inside of that area that we have been talking about here, the 3 counties that we have been referring to. So the Trinity is here, even though the Edwards is in the same place, which you'll see on the next bullet point. And so when we talk about the interaction of them, for the most part, we really don't know. We honestly don't really know whether we have more pressure in some areas in the Edwards that's sifting down into the Trinity or vice versa. We don't really know that. Now, there are some geology studies that have been done that can give us some of that information, but there are some areas we really don't know. We honestly don't know. So let's look at the Edwards. You see now the Edwards aquifer is this area over in here. That's the blue area, and that's a little difficult to see, so let's zoom in on that just a little bit. And when we zoom in it, now you see that it also has its hard hat area. And the hard hat area just means that it's a little bit more difficult to drill through. It's not all that bad, but it is a confined layer, and that confined layer is very much like the layers I showed you in the Trinity aquifer, those various layers. So now, if we go to that, to the next slide, we're driving around wherever we happen to be, and as we're driving around, we see these signs, and these signs will say contributing zone, or you see a sign that says recharge zone. What the heck does all that mean anyway? First, notice that this green area is the contributing zone. What that means is that some water, not all water, is going to be contributed from this area into what you see as the blue area, which is the recharge area. That's where the water goes into the Edwards. So this is huge. This is Rock Springs way up in here. This is Kerrville. San Marcos is right there. It's way above that. So it is gigantic. And one of the reasons why it's happening from a geological standpoint is that the rivers go that way. You see, every river is going that way. And so it's the way the slope of the water is. So some of that is going underground. Some of that is going above ground. Up on the Upper Edwards Plateau, which is that contributing zone, we have some cracks in the limestone that are up there, and sometimes some of the water goes through those little fissures. It goes underground for a while, sometimes on top of the ground for a while, and then it drops through a sinkhole, and I'll show you a picture of that in a second. And then it goes into a big cave, and then sometimes if there's enough artesian pressure that pushes the water out of the ground, then you'll see that it comes out as a spring, like Barton Springs as an example. So this is an actual hole in the ground that feeds the Edwards Aquifer. And folks, that's just water that's running across the ground, and it drops into the hole. And it is immediately into their water supply. That's one of the reasons why you hear everybody talking about don't dump things in your yard that are going to end up into the aquifer. That's how fast they can be into the Edwards Aquifer, okay? And that hole right over there is right near where Smithson Valley High School is in Comal County. Doesn't matter. All right, then the next thing that happens in the Edwards is you have these karst caves, and these karst caves that you see right there are caves that look like this. When you light them up inside, they look just like that. And so when you look at the evening news and it says something clever like the aquifer level is such and such, well, it's not the level of the water here. The aquifer level is the J17 well that's in downtown San Antonio at Fort Sam Houston. It's located there, and there is pressure, that is artesian pressure, that pushes up that well. And when you get a reading, it's the reading there, it's not the actual water level, okay? But it's a good indicator of what the water level is. All right, then sometimes after that, the water, if there's an artesian element like the Barton Springs, or in this case, Comal Springs. This is Comal Spring in Landa Park, and some of you might have sat on that little bench over there and marvel at the water that comes right out of the side of the hill. It's just really cool, and it is clear as can be. Absolutely pure water. So that's kind of the Edwards as we talk about the Edwards, but when we talk about our aquifer, the one that we are mostly getting our water out of, we're talking about the Trinity. And when we talk about the Trinity, by the way, I see some of you taking pictures of things. You're welcome to do that. But I have given a copy of this to Shay. Shay is sitting right back there. She has a copy of this, and you can all have it. All you have to do is get in touch with her, and she can make a copy of it for you. Just have a jump drive whenever you're going to be going over to the Barton Springs Groundwater Conservation District. You can have a copy of the whole thing. And folks, I don't care what you do with it because the information has to get out. So it's not copyrighted. All of this is there, including all of this animation stuff. But the point I want to make is I think it's so important that we get information to people so that they understand how critical our water supply is becoming. And folks, it is getting on a danger stage, truly. All right, so let's talk about the Trinity. When we talk about the Trinity, it is not going to be anywhere close to what the Edwards does in the recycling. What happens, or in the recharge, what happens is people say, well, if they got a lot of rain up there in Dallas, that's got to be good for us because we're on the same aquifer. No. It has no effect whatsoever because the water that falls here recharges here. The water moves excruciatingly slow. In addition to that, when the water hits the ground, the water is going to have only 4 to 5% of the water that is actually going to penetrate down to a pumpable state in the aquifer. Only 4 to 5% of what hits the ground. The rest is either going to be running off or it's going to be used by grass and trees and whatever vegetation is around. 4 to 5%. And here's the kicker. It takes 2 to 3 years for it to get to a pumpable state. So the rain that we got this last week will not get to your pump for 2 to 3 years at 450 feet. If your well is deeper than that, if you're at 700 feet, you're looking at least 3.5 years for it to get there. And that's one of the reasons why the drought has had an effect on the aquifer, because it's been in our series now since for a good 6 years. And so therefore, we are suffering from the drought, and that's one of the reasons for the decline. So the last thing I want to mention about the Trinity is the area that is the Trinity contributes about 59,000 acre feet of water to the Edwards. And so what that means in terms of acre feet, well, what's an acre foot? If I had a football field and I go from the 9-yard line to the opposing goal line, the full width, that's 1 acre. And if I put a foot of water on it, that's an acre foot. That's what that really means. And that in terms of gallons is going to be 325,851 gallons of water. And that's enough to supply a family of 5 for a year for both their direct and indirect water use. Direct water use is when you take a shower or drink some water or flush the toilet. Indirect is that when you buy your hamburger, it takes 400 gallons of water to make your hamburger. So when you buy a hamburger, indirectly you're using 400 gallons of water, you see? All right. So when we start talking about the water problem, it's not really a drought issue per se. It is more of a growth issue. And when we talk about the growth issue, what we mean by that is that if the land is clear, then about 50% of the water is able to go into the ground. Now that doesn't mean it's going into the aquifer, because you already know it's only 4 to 5%. That stuff that's going into the ground is feeding the grass and the trees and all of that stuff. The rest of it is running off. Only 10% runs off. And then we have evaporation and the trees breathing. That's transpiration. And so that water is going to go up and it kind of evaporates. Then when we build a city or any kind of a town and we put all the impervious cover, now the runoff is 55%. That's huge. And now only 15% actually percolates. And of that, 4 to 5% is going to end up as a pumpable state. You see why the building is really what is the nemesis here. And sometimes I do this and people say, well, why don't we have a moratorium on that? And I say, okay, let's do that. Let's make a law that you cannot have a house after this date. And the date is the day before you bought your house. You see? But then it's personal, you see. So anyway, my point about talking about this is that we really have a serious situation with what's happening with the water. But we are not alone in Texas. This is in Nevada. If you've been to Las Vegas, that's the Lake Mead right outside of Nevada, or Las Vegas. And so they've got the same kind of problem as we got, and it's across the world. The Mississippi Valley, terrible, terrible suffering at the present time. There's a leak. Listen to this. There's a leak in the Mississippi River that's going down into the aquifer that's been drained away for years and years and years. And now the river is going into the aquifer. Truly. It's scary when you think about that. All right. So here's another problem that we have. We take water and we get water to drinkable standards. We spend thousands of dollars to do that. And we dump it on the ground. It's like going to H-E-B and buying a case of Dasani, going home and watering your grass. Who does that? I did that one time. This lady said, I do that. Yeah. All right. Okay. So you already know that one of the things that's the cheapest thing for us to do and the easiest is for us to conserve water. And I think we're doing that, truly. And I'll show you a slide coming up that really kind of describes how much we're doing, and we're doing a lot. We are also, this is the what are we going to do about it thing, we're also looking at treating wastewater and returning it to potable water. And you know, sometimes when I say that, people go, oh, yuck. But the water that you drink today went through a Roman soldier way back when. It's the same water. You see, it's exactly, there will never be any more water than there was back then and there is today. It's the same stuff. And so when we talk about toilet to tap, in Texas, the first city that did that was Wichita Falls. And they started their system because truly they were running out of water. 18 months ahead, they were out of water. They did not get their system up and running as fast as El Paso did. So El Paso was actually the first city to do it. And then that was followed by Wichita Falls. And then if you've been to the entire Permian Basin, that whole basin, Odessa, Big Spring, that entire area is toilet to tap. They'd put their water mixed with the Colorado River there, and it's toilet to tap. And those of you who have been to Las Vegas in the last 40 years, you've been to toilet to tap. So if you've been brushing your teeth over there, toilet to tap. And it's in San Diego, Anaheim, it's in Tampa, Florida, and Kerrville is about to do that. So is San Antonio, so is New Braunfels, and so is the Dallas-Fort Worth area. There will come a day when if you have a sewage treatment plant, you will be required to return it back to potable water. It's coming because we don't have any more water. It's gone. It's going away. All right, so what can we do about it? Well, one of the things, we could increase the supply. Good luck with that. Where do we have a river in Texas that is strong enough to be able to support another dammed area? We don't. There are 5 areas where it's possible in Texas. 3 of them have voted it down repeatedly. And the other 2 are located on rivers that dribble. And so it's not going to happen there either. And so that's not going to happen. The other thing we could do is reduce the demand. And this is the part I was telling you about earlier, where this is 1960. In 1960, your washing machine used 40 gallons of water in one load for its cycle. Today, that's down to about 10 gallons. And your toilet used to take 5 gallons of water to flush the toilet. Now it's down to 1.2. And here's something for you. Don't put a brick in your toilet anymore, because you need the water to be able to move the solids down the pipe, you see? And if you put a brick in there, you're not going to have enough water. From the laws of physics, 1.2 is the lowest you can get, even 1.6. Don't put a brick in there. You're not going to like it because you're going to have to call a plumber. The other thing we can do is we can do both. I mean, truly, we can increase the supply by harvesting rain, and we can also reduce the demand by watering less. And what that means is we have to take and get kind of a shift in our paradigm. You know, we've had this paradigm for a long time that says we get the water from a well. Well, we need to get away from that and get into, we can start harvesting rain, you see? And if we are harvesting rain, by the way, that's one of their tanks. Those people right over there, that's one of their tanks right there. And we got to get away from acres and acres of green grass, and we have to get people to start thinking about xeriscaping. There's an I in there, not an O. Xeriscaping with native plants and having a minimal amount of grass. And here's kind of a good rule of thumb. The grass that you grow in your house should be no more than what you can water with rain that comes off of your roof. If you have more than that, you're stealing water from the rest of us. People say, but I love my grass. Okay, move to Houston. I mean, the reality of it is, folks, this is a semi-arid area. We don't have the water to be able to continuously do that. And so we're looking to take and just let people know how easy it is to harvest rain. And that's where we're going next, is to talk about the rain harvesting process. What do we do and how do we go about doing that? First, when we gather it, we're going to do one of 2 things with it. Either we're going to use it for plants and animals, that would be one. And then number 2, we're going to use it for household use. It's going to be inside of your home. And so when you use it inside or outside, it is all going to be centered around some sort of a tank. And so that tank is going to be there, and there's some stuff that happens before the water gets in the tank. We call that screening. And then there's stuff that happens after it comes out of the tank. That's filtration, which you do sometimes, but not all the time. And so let's talk about that piece. Let's start with the roof itself. When we go to collect water, let's assume for a moment that all 3 of these buildings have the exact same concrete slab. And they have the same overhang on the eaves that are around your house. Each of these will collect the exact same amount of water. So when you go to calculate your square footage of your roof, all you need is the square footage of the flat area. You do not have to calculate the hypotenuse. Yay, yay, I don't have to calculate the hypotenuse. So all you need is the square footage, and I'll get to that more in just a little bit. So, but I do want to make sure that you understand that it doesn't matter what the shape of your roof is, rain is going to fall basically straight down, and the fact that you are on an angle makes no difference for the amount of water that's going to be collectible for you. There are two kinds of systems. So first kind of a system is a dry system. And the dry system that we have, usually the tank is proximate to the structure. And so the tank is usually close to the house like that. So now, when it rains, the water goes down, gets into these pipes, and goes directly into the top of the tank. And now, whenever it stops raining, then these pipes are going to be dry, so we call that a dry system. All water tanks have got to have some sort of an overflow, because you just can't go outside and say, okay, I got enough, shut it off now. That doesn't work. And so that's going to be a wet system, and a dry system, and a dry system is depicted over here. Here we got the water that's going into the tank, and then it overflows and comes out over here. That's where the water is going to come out and go to a pump or a spigot. So that would be a dry system. In a wet system, it's a little bit different, because the tank is usually far away from the house. And so at my house, if I were to go on a diagonal from this corner to the corner back there, my tank is about twice that distance for the water to travel in my wet system. And so what happens in a wet system is when the rain falls, it goes down these down pipes over here, then underground, up, and then over, and drops inside of the tank. And so whenever it stops raining, there's water in these pipes right here. You see, all of that red stuff is going to be water that's going to be in there. Whatever that level is, that's going to be the level over here too, you see? So it's all full of water. So we call it a wet system. We also have to be worried about mosquitoes with that kind of a wet system. But it also is going to have an overflow. And then the other element about it is that the top of the tank has to be about 3 feet lower than whatever we have as a rain gutter. And that way, when the water falls inside of the pipe, it will automatically come out the lower pipe, because water seeks its own level. And that happens, it's not really instantaneous, but on my system, if I drop 5 gallons over there, I cannot run fast enough to get over here to see the 5 gallons come out. I mean, it really comes through there very rapidly. And hydrogeologist over there can tell you more about that. He's really good. And he's handsome, so I'm just saying. Okay, so then what happens with this kind of a system, if you stop and think about it for just a second, we're going to have water inside of these pipes, and if the weatherman says, hey, you know what? The weather's going to be so that it's going to be less than 30 degrees. Ooh, that means that my pipes are going to freeze. And so in order to prevent those pipes from freezing, we would extend this to daylight, and then we're going to have a low point clean out. That low point clean out is going to allow the water to drain out of those systems. And now, if it's freezing temperatures, I won't have any broken pipes. You do not need it with a dry system, but you do need to have it with a wet system. This is just called a low point clean out. That's right over there. All right? So here's an example of a picture of it where you see the water is being collected up in here. This is the underground portion that's over here. And whatever the height of the water is here is going to be the height of the water over there. And then whenever the cold weather comes or we open up the low point clean out, then the water is going to come out and drain the entire system. All right, everybody okay with that? So now, how much water can I go about collecting? For every 1 square foot of roof space, you're going to be able to collect 0.62 of 1 gallon in 1 inch of rain. Now, when I say the 0.62, I want you to remember that number, because it's an important number that you use for a lot of different calculations when we're talking about rain and rain harvesting, evaporation, or the water that you put on your grass. 6.2. Now, here's how you can remember that. That's the year I graduated high school. You see how easy this stuff is? I'm telling you, it's so easy. All right, so 0.62, remember that number. All right, so if we have 1,000 square feet of roof area, times 0.62 is 620 gallons. If your roof is 2,000 square feet, you're going to get 1,200 gallons of water in 1 inch of rain. 3,000 square feet, 1,800 gallons of water in 1 inch of rain. And so when we talk about the collection process, you actually collect. Most people think of rain as being drops instead of the volume. But if you have a valley in your roof, and you get out there when it's raining, it's pouring off of there. And that is collectible water. But so is the water that we get from condensation. So is the water early morning when you get the dew on there and your roof is kind of dripping early morning because of that. That's collectible water that you would put into your system. And I'll get to more in terms of the systems in just a little bit. So if you're collecting 30 gallons, the estimator that we have from over there, is that it's 31 gallons in our area here. But at 30 gallons, that's 18,600 gallons in 1 year. We'll talk about use in just a second. Now, let's talk about the screening process. The screening process starts out with you having some sort of screen on top of your rain gutter. That screen, it can be an open weave. Folks, you do not need to buy the microfiber stuff that people will try to upsell you to. All we're trying to do is keep the leaves and the sticks out of your system. So that thing right there would do just fine, because at the second level, the second thing that we're going to have is this thing here called a leaf filter. That one there has a brand name called Leaf Eater, and it has a screen that's on a 45-degree angle, and so that whenever any particulate comes down through that screen that was on your rain guards, on your rain gutter guards, it's going to be trapped on that. It's about the same porosity as a window screen. It's slightly finer than that. But that's where that's going to go, and it either goes right there in your downspout, or it can go right there because that bottom of it will rotate around 90 degrees and go out the back. And so if you turn that and go out the back, it's going to go this way and then down, or you can take and just put it in line just like you see there and cut off the rain gutter right up there. And that is going to take and screen it down to a window screen level. And the second thing that it does, which is really kind of important, it is your mosquito protection on that end of the system, particularly if you have a wet system. But even if you have a dry system, if the pipe is there and mosquitoes can go through that pipe, they'll go 40 feet in a pipe to find water to lay their eggs. So even on a dry system, you still need to have the mosquito protection on that end. And if you don't have something like that, you're going to build a mosquito condominium. I had a guy call me just recently, and he said, I have that leaf eater up there on my barn, and I need you to take it off because I can't get the water to go through it. That's what he had. And I said, you know what? If I take that off, then what is going to happen is that all of that rubble is going to be in your pipe. It's going to clog up your pipe, and then you're going to have to dig up all of the pipe in order to take and find it to be able to clear it, and then you have to start all over again. So, folks, you do need to screen the water before it gets into the pipe. All right. So I want to talk next about a first flush system, because if you ever do any kind of research on it, the first thing you're going to find is first flush. First flush. What does that mean? How does it work? So when we talk about first flush, the logic is absolutely wonderful. In practice, it's awful. And so the logic says if it has not rained for, let's say, 3 weeks, then on top of this roof, there's going to be stuff that settles there. It's going to be some dust, some silt. We're going to maybe get bird that's going to poop up there, maybe a squirrel pees up there. All of that stuff is on your roof. And so rainwater is pure until it hits something, and when it hits your roof and washes off, that first wash of water, we want to set aside in some sort of a container. And if we can set that aside so that when this fills up and the ball gets up to the top, then the water is going to bypass the dirty water and you're going to get cleaner water into your tank. See, that makes perfect sense. It's an absolutely wonderful idea, except that it doesn't work. And the reason why it doesn't work is because the people who sell you those things, well, number one, you have to have one in every single downspout. But the second thing is the people who are selling you that have this little drippy thing that's down here at the bottom, and they'll say, and that lets the water out so that you're ready to go for the next rainstorm. Statistician says, what happened to the sludge? It's in there. And it does have a filter. It's got a little 3-inch filter about that big, and that 3-inch filter gets clogged in a hurry, and people don't clean it out. And it's kind of like this. If somebody puts a rain gutters on your house, what they will do is they'll say, you know what? you need to take and clean that out every year. Well, who does that? You know, we don't do that. I know. You're one of the few, sir. You're one of the few. So, but we just don't do that, and you won't do that either, and that's what the problem is, because then it doesn't work, you see. It's there, but it doesn't work because the water is continually bypassing because it's full, and it's got a lot of dirt in it and so on. So I don't recommend those. If you were to use a pipe, this is what you happen. Number one, you're supposed to have 20 gallons per 1,000 square feet. So if you have, let's say, in my case, I have 6,000 square feet of roof off of 2 buildings, so I need to collect 20 times that. That's going to be 120 gallons. Come back to that. So this is the first flush for this system right there. You're not going to get 20 gallons of water in that little bitty pipe. You're lucky if you get 4 in there, because we get 0.6 of a gallon in every 1 foot of a 4-inch pipe. So we don't get very much water in there. The second problem that we have is that it's a maintenance chore that I pretty much already talked about. And then you have to have one of those in every single downspout, and because of that, you're having to take and clean it out, and you just won't do it. I mean, truly, folks, and you might do it the first month, but after that, out of sight, out of mind, you just forget to do it. So I don't really recommend that kind, but I do recommend a kind that's going to be a tank system. And when we talk about a tank system, what we have is a tank, and that tank that is going to be there is from a wet system. So the water comes across, it goes up here, drops into there, and once it gets to this point, it's going to have to take and fill up the tank. And then once the tank is full, it backs up, and then cleaner water goes inside of your tank. Now, in my case, my tank like that is 500 gallons. You say, wait a minute, Larry, you said that you only needed 120 gallons. That's true. I only need 120 gallons. But in my system, I'm going to take and use the water that's inside of the tank, some of the water, for me to use it in my garden. So connected to that spigot right there, I have a little pump, and that pumps the water over to my garden where I have a 55-gallon drum. And in the 55-gallon drum, I put my water-soluble fertilizer, and I take 50 gallons at a time out of that tank, and so I'm going to take that and pump it down 200 gallons. I've used my 120 gallons, you see, and now I fertilize my garden, so I haven't wasted any water. And now, when the next rain happens, now I have my 120 gallons worth of space. And why do I do 200 instead of 150? Well, because I have a long pipe, and that pipe might have silt in it. And so when the dirtiest water goes into the pipe, it's got to travel all the way to there before it goes into my tank. So I collect 200, you see, and I use it in my garden so I don't waste the water. So the cool thing about that system is there's no maintenance whatsoever. Because if there's bird poop in the water, or there's silt in the water, or there's squirrel pee, my garden likes that. And so my carrots become very happy carrots. And so when we think about the water in that sense, that's a far better rain harvesting first flush than the pipe system. So I would caution you to avoid the pipe system. So now we get to the containers, and whether the containers that you have is a 55-gallon drum that's like that, or whether it's going to be a metal tank. There's one of their metal tanks, by the way, right there. And then, or whether it's a concrete cistern that's like that. Each ring, by the way, is 900 gallons. So if you see those around someplace and you want to know how much is that, each ring is 900 gallons. That right there is my 50,000-gallon storage tank on my property in Bulverde. All right, water is terribly heavy. And if you're going to do rain barrels, I caution you to never put your rain barrel higher than 18 inches. 2 cinder blocks is 16 inches, plus a piece of 2x8 or 2x10 to kind of hold it all together. And then you're going to be at about 18 inches, and that's the maximum. These are up way too high. When you look at this, it's up way too high, and each one of those barrels weighs about 800 pounds. And children like to climb on things. And so if a child climbs on that thing, well then, and tips it over on top of them, then that 800 pounds is going to drop on them. So be very cautious about how high you put it. Sometimes when I do this, people say, well, how do I get pressure out of my rain barrel? How high in the air do I have to put it so I get pressure that's going to go to my garden? That's an interesting question, right? And so if you do the math on it, and this is not the statistician doing it, this is my partner, Dr. Stephen Granger, doing the math on it because he's an engineer and he's a lot smarter than I am. And so when he does the math on that, if you want 25 pounds of pressure out of the bottom of your rain barrel, you have to put it in the air 58 feet. That's 5 stories, 5.5 stories high to get 25 pounds of pressure. That's true, and it really is true. All right, so please don't do that. And when you look at this, you see a cable that goes over there, but the cable is tied to the support. It's not tied to the wall or anything, and so don't do that. When we talk about now everything coming out of the tank, when it's going to come out of the tank, we have to pump it someplace, and you always will need some sort of a pumping device. Does it gravity feed? Yeah, you get some ooze out of it, gravity feeding, but you're not going to get much in the way of pressure. And so everything starts with a pump. And in this case, we're talking about water that is only going to be for animals and landscaping. This is not potable yet. All right, so animals and landscaping. First thing is we have a pump, and inside of that pump right there in that metal part, there's a little bladder, and that bladder expands and contracts. And when the bladder goes all the way out to 60 pounds, it says to the pump, pause. And then whenever you open a faucet, it gets down to about 32 pounds. Then what happens is it says, okay, send me water. And so that's what that little bladder does. But if you only have that bladder, that thing is going to cycle in your day about 30 times a day. And so in order to not have it go so many times and therefore save wear and tear, what you would do is put in a pressure tank, like the pressure tank that you typically have on a well. You know, if you have a well, you have one of these, and it's designed to keep that well pump from cycling more frequently. And so you have one of these pressure tanks, we'll put that in the line, and then after that, we're going to take and now send the water to the animals, or send it to the garden, or send it to wherever we need it to go. And folks, that's it. You do not have to filter anything. That's your entire system if you're using it for landscaping with a hose or for animals. Unless you decide that you want to do drip irrigation. And if you need drip irrigation, then you have to go to 25 pounds of pressure, so you need a pressure reducer, number one. But then secondarily, what you need to do is to filter the water so that the little particulate that goes through the line is not going to clog up the little emitters, you see? And so you need some sort of a filter. Now, you can get a filter that comes with the rain harvesting system that looks like that. And it's really a cool little thing. And you can unscrew the bottom. And when you unscrew the bottom, you take that thing out of it. And once you take that out of it, then you clean it off and put it back in. And away it kind of goes, so to speak. Now, I use this 20 micron one in my garden for my drip system. And I use that because I don't want to have to go and clean that about every other month. I put that in there, and I change that every 3rd year. I'm a little lazy for that part. All right, so that's the system. That's the system that you would use for animals and landscaping. But what about potable use? If I'm going to go to potable water, what kind of filtration do I need for potable? Well, I got to have the pump. There's no doubt about that. I got to start with the pump, and I need that pressure tank. But now the water has to be filtered and purified. So for it to be filtered and purified, it's going to go through a system that generally runs between about $1,200 and $1,500 on a board that you can buy and hang into your utility room, into your garage, into your pump house, whatever you have. And that thing is composed of several different parts. First, it has 2 pressure gauges right there. And those 2 pressure gauges are there to tell you what the water pressure is going into the filtration and what the water pressure is coming out of the filtration. And if the second one starts reading a lower number than the first one, then you've got a blockage and it's time to change those filters. And as a general rule of thumb, you change the 2 filters in here about once every quarter. So every 3 months you do that, you change it. And then when you go to Home Depot, you can buy the little filters that go inside of here, or Lowe's or Ace Hardware, and they cost between about $19 and $29, give or take. Except there's a guy in Wimberley who sells them for $6. So I buy them from Terry in Wimberley when I need them, you see. So when we're talking about the different systems, you only need these 2 filters that are right there. And those 2 filters are 20 micron and then a 5 micron. And when I talk about that, sometimes people say, micron? Some people know what that is. But if you were to take out one hair is 70 micron. Not you, sir. Don't do that. One, I know Walt, and so that's why I'm picking on him. So 1 hair is 70 micron. So when we talk about 20 micron, it's a fourth of a hair. Okay, that's what all particulate would be trapped. That's a fourth of a hair. Now it goes down to 5 micron, and I'm going to come back to that in just a second. And then from there, it's going to go through a UV filter, which is not a filter at all. It's a sanitizer. It doesn't filter anything. It sanitizes the water so that what comes out can't hurt you. Now, in order to explain that, I need to take and talk a little bit about that. And by the way, the light bulb that's inside of there has to be changed every year without fail. Without fail, you got to change that every year because it's not the intensity of the bulb that matters. What matters is, it's not the fact that the light is on or off that matters, the intensity matters. So if it is not going to be intense enough, it will not render the germs inert. So here's what happens. I got to set this down. So let's suppose that I blow that up. That's that UV filter. I blow it up. I got a light bulb in the middle of that. And so when the water comes in, the water's going to swirl around that light bulb till it gets to the other end, and then it goes out. And while it's swirling around, if there are any germs or pathogens in there, they are rendered inert. It does not kill them. It does not take them out. It only makes them unable to reproduce. And because they can't reproduce, then they can't harm us, you see? So, and that's truly how the system is designed to work, and it works extremely well. Now let's take and go back just a second. Let's suppose that we don't have the 5 micron filter. We only have the 20 micron. So that means that a particulate of 15 micron can get through the 20. So now we have the same scenario with the same light bulb, and now we have a piece of dirt that's in there that's 15 micron. And now we have a germ hiding in the shadow. And if it can stay in the shadow as it goes around, it's never hit by the light and therefore never rendered inert. But at 5 micron, the shadows are not big enough for germs to hide. And that's why the 5 micron is critical. So sometimes people will say, well, can I only have a 5 micron? Yeah, you could, but you'd be changing it every month. So you want to have the 20 micron and then the 5 micron. Now, that's all you need, folks. That is your entire system for when you want potable water. That's all you need. You need a pump. You need to be able to have the pressure tank to keep that from operating. And then it goes through the filtration. The water comes out. Is more pure than you get from a public water supply. Truly. I'm a little bit lazy. And so I don't really want to have to change those 2 filters every single quarter. I want to stretch that out a little bit. So I have in my system something called a spin down filter. And a spin down filter is a 60 micron filter that's inside of here. The water comes in, spins around there, and any dirt gets in this little bowl that you see right down here at the bottom. And then whenever I have the opportunity or somebody comes to visit the system at my house, I just open that little valve that's right over there for about 4 seconds and close it, and I've cleaned out that system. And because I have that in my system, I change these 2 filters every 1.5 years. So for me, it was worth the $60 to buy that thing to get in line because I can just take it, open that for 4 seconds. I don't have to unscrew anything or do anything, you see. Now, sometimes I do have to take and clean this out, and periodically when people come to my house to view my system, I will take them through and I'll actually do it so they can see how easy it is. And truly it is very, very easy. So that I have in line, and the water goes in, the water comes out. But I also wanted to know how much water I was using, and so to know how much water I was using, I put in line a water meter, and the water meter is just in line, and that tells me how much water I'm using. Now, when I first made up this slide, Dr. Granger said, well, wait a minute, if you do it that way, the water that's going to your garden is not going through the meter, and therefore it's not being counted. All right, so then let's just move it. Let's take it from right there, and let's move it. We'll just move it there. And so you can take and put it in either place, depending upon what you want to measure. And so making that happen is pretty easy when you consider the filtration process. But that's the entire element that we have for filtering water. Now let's talk about how much water you can collect. And I'm going to use kind of a ballpark figure, and I think you'll find this to be a very easy way of determining that. Let's suppose that we have a house, and the house has got 1,700 square feet. And when I say 1,700 square feet, I'm saying without a garage. Because if you had a garage and it's 400 and it's a 2-car garage, you're going to add 450 square feet to that. And if you have a 3-car garage, you'd add 600 square feet to that number. So I'm just saying it's without a garage at this moment. It's just 1,700 square feet. Now that yellow area that you see all around it is where the roof is hanging over the outside of your home. That's 2 feet all the way around, typically. And so that's going to be 20% more roof than you have concrete or living area. So now all you got to do is to take and add that 20% in to the 1,700. And you can do that very easily by multiplying by 1.2. 1 plus 2%. And I'm sorry, 20%. So now that house has 2,040 square feet of roof on a 1,700 square foot house, you see? So whenever you have your house, all you have to do is take the square footage that you have, add 20%, multiply by 1.2, and then after that, we're going to take and calculate how much water we can collect out of it. What do I multiply by? 0.62, you bet. 0.62. So now I can take my 2,040 for my 1,700 square foot house, multiply that by 0.62, and in 1 inch of rain, that house is going to give me 1,200, almost 1,300 gallons of water. In 30 inches of rain, it's going to give me 38,000 gallons of water. In my system, in Bulverde, I collect about 214,000 gallons of water every year for my family and my garden. So if we talk about 38,000 gallons of water, that's enough water for a family of 2. That is direct water, not indirect and direct. But direct water that will support a family of 2 people. That's only on the 1,700 square foot, 2,000 square foot of roof. To me, this is the most important part of the entire presentation, because the question that often I get will be, well, how do I know how big a tank I need to have? Well, the tank is going to be dependent upon what your demand is. And so what we would do as Rainbees, if we come and help you or talk to you on the phone, we would take and talk to you about what size that tank should be. First, let's only talk about inside of your home for a minute. Inside of your home, we use 50 gallons per day per person. That includes the showers, the laundries, the dishes, and all of that other stuff that's inside of your home. We use 50 gallons per day per person. So in my situation, we have 3 people in the family, and so we're going to collect 150, or going to need 150 gallons of water per day for the family. And now if I multiply that by 30 days, then I'm going to end up with 4,500 gallons of water every single month that my family needs to survive. So calculating it, it's pretty easy. You just take 50 gallons a day per person, and then you take and multiply that by the 30 days, and it tells you it. Okay, now, the question that you have to answer for yourself is, how much water do you want in your savings account? And you can think of it that way. You got a savings account that if I run out of rainwater, it's going to take and supply me for how long? Well, in the 1950 to 1959 drought, we had one time period when there was 87 days in a row with no rain whatsoever. 87 days. So Stephen and I would recommend that you have a 3-month supply. And so a 3-month supply on 4,500 is going to be something around 13,500 gallons. So we would recommend that your tank be a 15,000 gallon tank. And if you get a metal tank, the metal tank is going to be 19 feet in diameter, 7 foot 6 inches tall. When you talk about metal tanks for residential purposes, all of them are 7 foot 6 inches tall, but the diameter changes according to how big it is. My tank is 50,000 gallons and it's 37 feet in diameter. Stephen's tank is 30,000 gallons and it's going to be about 27 feet in diameter. So the diameter of the tank is what dictates the geography you have to allow for it. Another way that you can calculate how much water you are using is to look at your water bill. You have some sort of a bill that says you've used this many gallons. Take about 4 of those bills and then average them. And when you average them, you know that you're getting in through your pipes, you're getting 11,500 gallons of water. And so if you have a family of 3, well, we know that we're going to be using 4,500 gallons of water for my family of 3. But 11,000 came into my house. So where did the other water go? I don't know. Sometimes it went to grass. Sometimes it might go to a swimming pool. So now you say, well, wait a minute, I got a pool, and I have some evaporation from the pool, so some of those 11,000 are going to go in the pool. Okay, so let's do that. So now we have a pool that's 15 feet by 25 feet. The first thing we want is the square footage of the surface area. So we multiply 15 times 25, we get 375. Now look at what we multiply that by. 0.62, which is 1 inch of evaporation, you see? And so now that 1 inch of evaporation means that in 1 inch of evaporation, we're losing off of that pool 232 gallons of water. But remember, in a pool that's in here in the middle of Texas, we lose 3.5 inches every week. So now we multiply times 3.5. So every week times 4 weeks in a month means that that pool is evaporating 3,260 gallons, 56 gallons of water every single month. So now we can redo the math. We know we got 4,500 and we got this 32. So let's put that together and subtract that. And the difference is now there's 4,000 gallons going somewhere. And that's really what we were kind of getting to with this not having you have so much grass. We really would encourage you to murder some of your grass. All right. So usually the question about this time, because I'm just about to wrap up, is who are Rainbees? What do we do? How do we go about doing it? Well, first of all, it started with just Stephen and I about 6 years ago. And so one of the things that we did is we used to just visit with people and talk to people about rain harvesting. But we deliver presentations a lot. We do a presentation about 1 every 3rd day. We deliver a lot of presentations. But we deliver on a wide range of water conserving subjects. Anything from the aquifer to rain harvesting to composting to wicking containers to rain barrels to pruning trees. So it's a big wide range of courses, about 16. And if you go to our website, we put some cards out here on the chairs. If you go to our website, rainbees.com, right on the front, it'll take and show you what those classes are. The second thing that we do is we invite you to come to my home in Bulverde, and at my home I have a rain harvesting system, and I can show you the filtration system. I can show you how it works. I can talk about the wet system for the 50,000 gallons, and then I have 2 5,000 gallon tanks that collect water off the outbuildings that sends the water to my garden, and so I can do that also. And then the other thing that we do is we are consultants. We are the outreach program for the Comal Master Gardeners and the Comal Trinity Groundwater Conservation District. And we have offered our services also to the Hays County in terms of their outreach program. We would be happy to do that. And so we go to people's homes and we help them to figure out where the tank should be. How do we get the water there? How do we get the water back? What kind of filtration do we need? That kind of stuff. And all of those things that you see right there are absolutely free. We charge nothing for what we do. We are hosted by the Comal Trinity Groundwater Conservation District and the Comal Master Gardeners. And so what we do is free. Yesterday I had 3 Rainbees that I visited in Wimberley. And so periodically we go to there. And we don't sell anything, by the way. We don't install anything. I'm 81 years old. I'm not installing anything anymore. And so we don't sell anything, we don't install anything, we don't push any products. We simply are able to take and talk to you about rain harvesting to try to help you to understand it. You know, folks, if I say a well, everybody knows what that is. Everybody knows how that happened. But when you say rain harvesting, it's kind of out there. Hopefully it's not so out there today after we have gone through this. It's really not out there. It's a very simple system that I like to say is complex, but not complicated. It's complex because it's got a lot of little bitty parts, but it's not a complicated system. The last thing I want to share with you is our website. And if you go to rainbees.com, you'll come to this. And right here in the middle of the page, there's a whole bunch of classes that are listed there. They're going to be in a green format, if you will. And so you can see all of the classes, where we have them and what we have. And if you're a member of a group and you need a speaker, that's what we do. So if you were to hover over here where it says gardening, you get these 4 choices right over here. And if you click on Master Gardeners, you're going to get some information about Master Gardening. Drip irrigation is going to give you a handout on drip irrigation. Then we have one on wicking gardens and wicking containers, where your garden is watered from underneath instead of from over the top. Then there's one on rain barrels, how to build rain barrels, and that's this one over here. Comes out of Texas A&M. And then the important one for you is the next one. Right here where it says sources, if you hover over sources, you're going to get 2 different choices that you can make. The first one is calculators. And if you click on calculators, you're going to get this sheet that has a whole bunch of different calculators to help you calculate stuff, whatever the stuff is. And if you happen to have a ranch, or you know somebody on a ranch who needs to know how much water I need for my ranch and all of the animals on it, right down at the bottom of here, right underneath this one right over here in that area, there's a link for you to click on, and it's an Excel spreadsheet, and it has yellow blocks in it. And so in the yellow blocks, you just simply put in how many of those animals you have. So you'd say, I have 6 horses and 17 cows and 14 chickens and 27 goats. And it'll tell you exactly how much water you need per month to be able to maintain that ranch. So that calculators can help you to do that. And then the next thing we have is sources, and the sources is the really important one that I like you to get to. And when you go to sources, you're going to get these 3 choices for you to make. This stuff in the middle right over here is information sheet, general information about rain harvesting, and there's the stuff about the wet system and the dry system right there. We already talked about that. This out over here under sourced items, those are items I bought for my system 6 years ago, and where I got them and what they cost me at that time. And I put that up there because sometimes people don't even know what to search for. And so this helps people to be able to at least know what some of the component parts are. And some of those websites or some of those sources may not be valid today, but it also will give you a ballpark of what they were cost-wise 6 years ago. You obviously are going to have some inflation to today. The most important one is the last one on the right, that one that's over there. Sources we know. These are people who install things. These are people who sell things. These are people who you would be able to take and call and be able to have them do something for you, whatever they might be. And this is the first page. And if I click and I go to the next page, it's a total of 4 pages long. And under where it says pumps and pipes right over here, that's where the guy in Wimberley is that I was telling you about, Terry Raines. He supplies all of the various installers that I know. In addition to that, if you keep going down, you'll find where there are other kinds of people who install systems. So if you're interested in system, we have folks over there from Harvest Rain, and then we have one over here under Secure. They both are installers of systems, so you can go to them. They are not currently on my website, but they will be tomorrow. I will put them in there tonight. So, but I appreciate that you're here. I mean, truly, it's so important that people understand how critical our water supply is, and also that there are people who can help you to do all of this stuff that you might need to do. I get questions from time to time about, can I install the system myself? Yes, you can. I mean, if you're handy, it's not a difficult thing to do. But if you are like me, 81 years old, you might say, well, I'm not doing that. And so... But truly, I'm hoping that you can walk away with the fact that rain harvesting is important. It is critical to our future. toilet to tap is critical to our future. There are some other things in the wind that are happening for helping us with the water supply, the decline. I don't have time to talk about all of those today, but nevertheless, there is action that is being taken. And so with that, we're at a point where questions, and hopefully I haven't made you feel like that.
And if you do have a question, me and Alyssa will have a mic for you, so feel free to raise your hand.
What I first would like to do is, we have the representatives from the GCDs. Could I ask you to give us an update on your GCD if you're still here? Are they still here? And what we're looking for is what's the status? Where is it in the future? Are we in trouble? We're in trouble. I think we're in trouble. I mean, I showed you that. And so here we have a couple, we have three of our folks who are the general managers of GCDs. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the great presentation here. A lot of the water level data you showed were from state wells located in our district, so I think you've captured pretty effectively the current state of aquifer conditions in at least the eastern half of our district. To the west, those aquifer units are a little closer to the surface and recharge a little more readily. So I would say, on a really high level, we're in really bad shape to the east and not as quite a bad shape to the west. I think in some areas we're seeing upwards of 4 to 5 feet of decline year over year in the lower Trinity.
And historically, we have typically saw 1 foot to maybe 1.5 feet. And we're at a point where, and this is true of the Comal Trinity also, we're at a point where we're losing the water level at 4.5 feet. And here's a statistic that is a true statistic from the Comal Trinity Groundwater Conservation District. Last quarter of last year, in 1 quarter, 3 months, it went down 9.7 feet average throughout the county. You're absolutely right, sir.
Yeah, at the risk of just oversimplifying, these are complex systems, and the Trinity out to the west behaves a little differently than it does when it's deeply confined to the east. But yeah, I'd say we're in pretty deep trouble, or we're headed that way for the time being.
Thanks.
Thank you, Lane. In the eastern portion of our area and in the Edwards Aquifer system and the Eastern Trinity system, we've got the lowest spring flow at Barton Springs that we've ever recorded, and our monitor wells are at their lowest as well. So we're 1 step away from the most severe drought that we've ever declared in the history of the district. We're getting some nice rain this spring, but it's not quite enough. We could use a nice couple of tropical storms to come soon to Gillespie County to recharge our systems. But the fact is, we desperately need rain. We need folks like the Rainbees to spread the word and find alternative sources of water for us.
Thank you. Thank you. Laura?
Speaking for Hayes Trinity groundwater, the darkest green up here, I have similar news to share. We have 5 dedicated monitor wells, all of which have reached the lowest percentile that we have ever recorded them to be. We entered in 2022 is when the district went into, for the first time ever, its most extreme number 4 drought stage, and we've pretty much been in it ever since then. So yeah, we're in a bad situation. What we don't know is if we move into a period of rain, like 2015-ish type of rain, what will we see as far as recharge, and how quickly will that happen? That's the part that we're